Hi everybody, my name is Green Leader, and this is Green Squadron Games. As I'm sure many of you are aware, the FTC hearing for the Microsoft Activision deal has finally concluded, but there has been a bunch of information that has come out from there that I still haven't had a chance to talk about yet, so that's what we're going to be doing today. In particular, we're going to talk about how Phil Spencer had a whole list of publishers and developers that he was considering acquiring for Xbox, in particular, Sega and Bungie. We have this article from The Verge doing a phenomenal job of covering the FTC hearing, in which, from the hearing, we get this internal email from November of 2020 from Phil Spencer to a whole bunch of the heads of Microsoft and Xbox, requesting the approval to approach Sega. In which he says, "I'm writing to request strategy approval to approach Sega Sammy regarding a potential acquisition of their Sega gaming studios. For context, Bill and I have reviewed the business case for acquiring Sega and are both supportive. We believe that Sega has built a well-balanced portfolio of games across segments with global geographical appeal and will help us accelerate Xbox Game Pass both on and off console. Please find the attached memo and bullets below for additional detail on our strategy to prioritize our next acquisition target, a brief overview of Sega's gaming portfolio, and value drivers for the potential acquisition." And I think what's really interesting about this is how well Sega Gaming Studios is doing, and which he points out, Sega's gaming has represented roughly half of Sega Sammy's revenue and operating income, or about $900 million of revenue, and 60 to 90 million of operating income in each of Sega Sammy's last 3 fiscal years. So, I mean, Sega's clearly doing well. And I do think it's actually a fairly good idea for Xbox to work with Sega, considering that Sega already is a well-known entity within the Asian markets, whereas Xbox has had such a hard time trying to get their foot in the door in the Asian markets. So them working together is actually, in my opinion, probably more beneficial than anything they will get out of the Activision Microsoft deal. So I do find that interesting. Now, in 2021, in April of 2021, they put out another merger document for potential acquisition targets. Sega's still on the list, but they also had a few other developers on the list as well. So top of their list here, they had Thunderful, which, to be fair, I'm not that familiar with, but apparently they're a mobile games studio / developer. You also have Supergiant Games, which is a phenomenal indie game developer. They've made such games as Bastion, Transistor, Pyre, Hades, all of which are phenomenal indie games, and I think that would kind of be a pretty good fit for them. You also had Niantic, Playrix, and Zynga, all of which I believe are mobile studios. Also, interestingly enough, Zynga was actually bought, so they're actually kind of off the table right now, but they were bought out by 2K, if I remember correctly. And then on top of that, you have Bungie, IO Interactive, and Scopely listed in a separate group down here marked as engagement and social interactions expansion. So that's kind of an interesting idea. But anyway, Scopely I'm not that familiar with, but Bungie we know has had a pretty long history with Xbox in the past, but I wonder how much that's going to work in their favor, or would have worked in their favor had Bungie not been bought out by Sony. But anyway, I mean, Bungie being a first-party studio with Xbox for a long time, they did end up leaving Xbox, and I think the reason why was because Xbox had a little too much control over the IP, and in my opinion, that was largely why they left and why they ended up signing a deal with Activision, of all companies, to essentially have a deal in which they would have full control over the IP. So I wonder how well that would have worked had they even approached them. And then IO Interactive as well. I think that's an interesting choice. They've got the great franchise of Hitman, but I wonder how well that would have worked, considering that, in my opinion anyway, I feel like they're a lot more closely associated with Sony than with Xbox, so I wonder if they would have even taken that call or gone forward with any negotiations. But it's an interesting thought. While I do think it's a good idea for Microsoft to acquire some first-party studios to work on producing a better slate of exclusives for Xbox, Microsoft can't just buy their way into a better competitive situation. Microsoft has some serious issues with how they handle their IPs and their developers that I think they need to address. Number one, trying to control their game studios a little too closely, which, let's be honest, is the reason why Bungie left in the first place. Number 2, excessive focus on Game Pass, which Spencer has already admitted cannibalizes their own game sales. This is good for Xbox because they get an increased revenue in the short term, but the revenue split with their devs is not nearly as good as when the games are bought outright, meaning that there could potentially be a rift between the developers and Xbox, resulting in potentially developers leaving Xbox. And then on top of that, we've got some interesting hiring practices in which Microsoft tends to focus on hiring contractors for a specific game for a lot of their first-party studios, and not hiring full-time employees, resulting in high turnover, development staff, and mishandling of a franchise. In particular, I'm talking about 343 and Halo. Because they didn't have a consistent staff for the last, 3 games, Halo 4, 5, and Infinite, you get some very jarring differences between Halo 4, 5, and Infinite in terms of their story and in terms of their gameplay issues. And you can really see it most in Halo Infinite and how rough their launch was. And because Microsoft hasn't addressed their own internal problems, I am concerned they will create these problems in their newly acquired studios and will have these issues moving forward for potentially years. But what do you guys think? Do these acquisitions seem like a good idea or even a good match? Should Microsoft focus more on fixing their internal problems rather than just trying to buy more studios? And if the Activision deal even goes forward, do you think Microsoft will stop there? Or will they continue to target other studios and publishers for acquisition? But tell me what you guys think. Anyway, if you guys have enjoyed the video, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing. But until next time, this is Green Leader, signing out.